Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storybook Test Bootcamp. This week, we're covering snapshot tests. So these are a little bit different than like component tests or accessibility tests or visual tests that we've been covering in the weeks before this. This one is almost more of an escape hatch for when any of those other test types don't fit what you need. So let me show you what I mean. So just like every other week, I just published this guide all about snapshot tests. And let me skip to what it is. So it's where you take a snapshot, not visually of like the screenshot or like what your UI produces in the code. And instead you take a snapshot of the HTML or sometimes the DOM of what your component renders. And so in this case, I've taken a snapshot of a button component and all of those Tailwind classes that are used to style it. And then I made a change. And so when the test ran again, it compared against that HTML snapshot, noticed one of the class names changed, and so gave me this diff. Now, just real quick, can you see what the difference is? If you read through all these class names and compare them here, can you tell where the difference is? I'll give you a hint. It's here. I changed the horizontal padding. So that's pretty hard to discern, right? This is why snapshot tests are not actually a great option for a majority of your tests. Now, they can be really useful for things that are hard to verify with another type of test. So like the example I'm going to show is a button where if you provide a certain prop, it throws an error. And so it's pretty hard to verify visually that the error renders, especially since that error is itself a failure. But if you do it within, say, vtest, you can verify that that error actually throws, and it's not a test failure because the error throwed. It's instead a test pass because the error throwed. So things like that. You might need some escape hatches for odd cases like that. And so we want to make sure you're equipped to handle those odd cases. And so we'll show you how to do snapshot testing. Now, in Storybook, snapshot testing happens actually not in Storybook, just with stories in Storybook. And so you can reuse your stories that you've already written, which are kind of like test cases inside of your Storybook. You can reuse those using this API we call portable stories inside of other testing environments like vtest or jest or playwright component tests. So I'm going to show vtest. So let's do that. So it takes a little bit of setup. If you're using Storybook Test already, it actually uses portable stories kind of under the hood to function. And so we've done that setup for you. But I'll go ahead and show you roughly what it takes here. So this is the vtest setup file created by Storybook Test. And it's all about the set project annotations here. So an annotation in Storybook is things like your args, your decorators, your parameters, your loaders, if you have those. There's a lot of Storybook concepts that can be included in annotations, and those can be applied at either the project level or the component in your meta or at the story level. And when Storybook renders that story, it goes and fetches all of those annotations from all of those levels and applies them correctly and make sure they cascade right, and does a lot of work for that. So what Portable Stories does is it does that work. And so to get the project level annotations on your portable stories, you have to call this set project annotations and run it in the before all. The API is a little bit different depending on what tool you're using. This is vtest's setup. So that makes sure that the annotations are respected, so that when I run a story as a test in vtest using portable stories, it respects the way my Storybook has things set up. So the first one I'm going to do is this primary story. I'm going to get a snapshot of the rendered HTML for the primary story. And so to do that, I've got this test file here, and it's just a vtest test file. The main thing here is I'm importing my stories from Button.Stories, and then I'm using Compose Stories that comes from Storybook React, and this is the Portable Stories API. So I pass it my stories, and then from there, I get an object containing whatever stories are in that file. And so in this case, I've got primary and I've got throw error, which I'll show you in a second. But first, let's run primary. And so I've got this test. I call it button snapshot. I do primary.run, which is the final part of the Portable Stories API. And that just renders and mounts the story. If it had a play function, it'll run that play function. It does everything in the storybook, in the story lifecycle. It'll do it for you with .run. And then I'm just expecting, in this case, the first child of the body. So basically the entirety of what gets rendered in this test. And it's going to match an inline snapshot. And so when I run my tests here, let me do this. Run my tests. Whoops. First, I'm going to get my environment set up. Now I'm going to run my tests. And so it's doing my stories transformed into tests automatically. It's going to do that because all it's doing is running vtest under the hood, but then it's also going to run these explicit vtest tests in my button test file. And so it ran button snapshot, and you can see it actually generated this code and inserted it in my test file here. And so now I have a snapshot that I can compare against. So if I go make a change to my button file, I'll do that padding change that was in the documentation, which was here. So I'm going to change it from px4 to px3. As soon as I save, watch mode is going, so it reran all my tests. And it should have. Interesting. Let me rerun it again. There we go. So it told me button snapshot 1 is mismatched. It expected to see the green stuff, and instead it sees the red stuff. px4, px3. And so in that case, that's a change I wanted to make. And so I'm just going to hit U in vtest, which will update that snapshot, which writes the, well, where is it? It's all the way at the end. Yeah. So now px3 is in my snapshot. So that's the general concept of snapshot testing. I did want to show you that error case though, because it's a legitimate case to use this type of test, even when you have better tools available. So I have a story here. I call it throw error. I'll come back to these tags in a second. But I apply an arg, which just takes this, do not use this, it will throw an error prop and sets it to true. And in my button component, what I've done is I've just, if that prop is provided at all, if it's truthy, I'll just throw an error. It's a really simple example, but it gets the point across. So this is a case where I'm throwing an error on purpose, and I want to validate that error throws. Now, I can't do this in Storybook, because anytime I visit this story, it would throw an error, and that's not actually that useful. And so that's why I've applied these tags. So the bang means remove. So I've removed the dev tag, which prevents it from showing up in Storybook's sidebar. So if I pull up Storybook, you'll see that button, let me refresh it. You'll see that button does not have the throw error story there. And then I've also removed the test tag. And the reason why I've done that is because I don't want this story automatically transformed into a test so that when I run my component test here, it's included in, because that error will be thrown and it will cause a failure, and that'll be a confusing failure because I want the error. And so in this case, I'm going to write a vtest test myself manually and reuse the throw error story using Portable Stories. So this time, this is just a little bit of vtest API, I guess, where I do the thrower.run, which again mounts it, but this time I'm expecting that to throw an error. And so I await my expect. I do this .rejects because throwerror.run returns a promise. And so I expect it to error or reject. So I expect or reject, and then to throw error. And then you can apply a string that'll match the error message. And so it's its own type of snapshot test. So let me run those again just to show you that they pass. And then if I change this to just say error and then save, which will run the test again, you'll see that it functions just like a snapshot test does, where I expected error and I received I tried to tell you. So that's snapshot testing. It's a pretty simple concept. Just the APIs available and the tools you have to use are quite different than everything else we've shown so far in Storybook Test. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next week.